What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. It's time to continue our 2023 schedule preview projected records for the 2023 college football season. And we continue them with the Florida Gators. There was a schedule last year for the Florida Gators. The overall record going 6-7 last year for this Florida team. 6-6 in the regular season. So yeah, they kind of had an up and down season. Of course, it was Billy Napier's first year. We kind of knew Florida. We kind of thought Florida would kind of be a little bit of a better team than that. Of course, they didn't live up to the expectations that we thought. This is a team that I kind of picked going 7-5 last year. But you look at who they played in the non-conference. They played Utah. They played USF, Eastern Washington. That was not too tough of a non-conference schedule. Of course, Utah, they ended up winning that one. And they also played Florida State out of the non-conference. Of course, they play Florida State every year. That's a rival game. They lost that team on the road. They lost to Kentucky at home. I mean, after that Utah win, we thought Florida was going to be like a team that, you don't want to sleep on. We thought they would be undefeated heading into the Week 4 game against Tennessee. That was their first loss in the SEC. They almost came back and won that game. LSU, they lost to them at home. They obviously got beat by Georgia in Jacksonville. It was a game that, got closer a little bit, but then Florida started to collapse in that game. And then Vanderbilt on the road, they lost that one. And then they lost to Florida State on the road as well. So, yeah, tough up and down year for Florida State in 2022. What would the schedule look like heading into 2023? Anthony Richardson gone. Going to be a different Florida team this year. We just don't know how good they're going to be. Here's a schedule for Florida heading into 2023. You look at who they'll play in the non-conference. They'll play Utah once again, and this time it will be on the road. Utah probably going to be one of those teams that has a chance to win the Pac-12 for 3 years in a row. They have a lot of production coming back. Cam Rising also coming back. That is a tough non-conference game to kick off the year. Of course, they played them last year, and they'll get them once again. This time it will be on the road. And then they'll play McNeese here on September the 9th. Then they'll play Charlotte out of the non-conference as well. And then, of course, they'll play Florida State once again. That's a rival game. You never know. This time, they'll get that one at home. Florida State with a lot of production coming back. And then out of the SEC East, they'll get to play LSU once again. That's a game that's played almost every year. That's a rival game. And then they'll play Arkansas as well here on November the 4th. So they don't really get a tough draw there out of the SEC West. At least it's not like at least it's not Alabama and LSU. But LSU, obviously one of the top teams in the SEC West last year. Of course, they have to play them every year, and that's always pretty tough. But with the schedules coming out next year, it could be a game that could probably not be played next year. But that's the SEC West schedule. Let's go now game by game for this Florida team. So they'll start the season off against Utah here on the road. That will be a really tough game to play against, and that will be on the road. It's going to be a tough place to play. And then they'll play McNeese here on September the 9th. So you got your two non-conference games to kick off the year. And then in Week 3, they'll play Tennessee here at home. Obviously lost to them on the road last year, so kind of like a revenge game for Florida here. Good news is it's a home game, but we just don't know how good this Florida team is going to be. And then they'll play Charlotte after that on September the 23rd. So you play 3 out of those 4 non-conference games in the month of September. You play Utah on the road, though. That's going to be a tough one. And then they'll play Kentucky here on the road on September the 30th. This should be a back-and-forth game. I'm expecting kind of like a back-and-forth contest between Kentucky and Florida like it always is almost every year. Of course, Florida got beat by them last year at home. Could they get revenge and do the same to Kentucky and beat them on the road? Then they'll play Vanderbilt after that on October the 7th. They'll get this one at home. Then they'll play on the road at South Carolina, another tough place to play. And then they'll get Georgia here on October the 28th. They'll get a bye week before playing this game. Of course, they get a bye week almost every year when they play Georgia. That game is always in Jacksonville as well. And then they'll play Arkansas here on November the 4th. Then they'll play back-to-back road games here with LSU and Missouri. So tough back-to-back road games here on November the 11th and November the 18th. LSU obviously going to be a tough one there on the road. LSU, one of the top teams from last year in the SEC West. Missouri on the road will be a tough one. Missouri was a pretty decent team last year. A lot of production coming back for this team. So you can expect Florida to probably lose that game as well. And then they'll end things out there on November the 25th against Florida State. So yeah, all in all, this schedule a little bit tough for Florida. They'll play back-to-back road games again against LSU, Missouri, and they have to play Utah out of the non-conference, one of the top teams from the Pac-12 a year ago, winning the Pac-12 championship. And they also have to play Kentucky and South Carolina on the road. So they do have tough road games this year. That it is a pretty difficult schedule for this Florida team. We just don't know how good they're going to be. Let's get right to the schedule now, or actually the projected record for this Florida team. And this is the scale I've been pretty much using for my projections. If it's a 1% game, Florida's got no chance of winning that one. You probably won't see any of those games on here, though. 20%, these are games where Florida's going to be about 2 touchdowns of an underdog. 40% in the yellow, games where Florida's going to be about a touchdown of an underdog in the yellow at 40%. 50-50 games, these are games where they can go either way. Florida will be probably like a favorite, maybe like an underdog heading into those games, but these are games where they can go either way. Purple games in the 60% range. Florida's going to be favored by a touchdown in these games. 80% games, there'll be a couple touchdowns of favorites in the blue. And then 90% games in the green. These are games where Florida's going to be favored by more than 3 touchdowns. Let's start with the green games here for Florida. 90% in the green, which we always start with when we do these projections. And I got 2 of those on the schedule. It's the 2 non-conference games, or 2 out of the 4 non-conference games on the schedule, McNeese and Charlotte. I think Florida has no business to lose both of these games here. These games will be in the month of September, and Florida should be favored by a lot of numbers in both of these non-conference games. These are cupcake games as well for Florida, so they have no business to lose both of those games, McNeese and Charlotte here in September. So I think Florida will be favored in those couple games by more than 3 touchdowns. Let's go to the games now in the blue at about 80% here for Florida. And I got 1 game on the schedule, and that's Vanderbilt here at home. I know Vanderbilt beat Florida last year. That game was on the road. It should be probably in the purple, but I'm going to stick with it and put it in the blue just because it's a home game for Florida. I got to put it here. And Vanderbilt obviously didn't make it to a bowl game last year. I know they finished strong, but it wasn't quite enough to get to a bowl game. But I think Florida, based off of where they were last year, I got to put this one in the blue because they didn't finish strong. But, I'm going to put this one here in the blue for Florida as of right now, but it could switch to a touchdown game by the time we do our predictions in May. So I think Florida will be favored by about a couple touchdowns against Vanderbilt here. This will be the only game I think they'll be favored by a couple touchdowns and 80%. We now go to the games where Florida is going to be favored by a touchdown. I don't have any games here on the schedule, I believe, for Florida to be a touchdown favorite. So let's go to the underdog games now. Games where Florida is going to be about maybe a 1%, 20%, or 40% underdog. I don't have any 1 or 20% games, but I do have some yellow games here on the schedule. It's Utah on the road, South Carolina on the road, Georgia, and then LSU on the road. I think all these games Florida will be a heavy underdog in. I'm not saying they're going to have a really good shot to win. I think they do have a really good shot to win some of these games on the road, and some of the games, obviously Georgia's a neutral site game, but mostly their 40% games are on the road. Utah on the road, that will be a tough place to play. South Carolina was one of the best finishing teams in the SEC last year. And then LSU on the road, going to be a tough place to play. But that's a rival game. You never know what can happen. But I think, Florida will be a heavy underdog in that game as of right now. But it could switch to a 50-50 game, but it's on the road. And we just don't know how good this Florida team will be. And Georgia, obviously, I think they'll be a heavy underdog in that game. Because it's a neutral site game, I can't put it in the orange. So I'm going to stick with it and put it in the yellow. South Carolina, like I said, was one of the best finishing teams last year. That's why I got to put it in the yellow. And I think all these games here for Florida, they're going to be heavy underdogs in. And then the rest of the games here on the schedule, Tennessee, Kentucky on the road, Arkansas at home, Missouri on the road, and then Florida State at home are all pretty much 50-50 games. Games that can go either way. Tennessee, one of the most explosive offenses from last year. Good news, Florida will get this one at home this year. So they have a really good shot to beat Tennessee this year. Kentucky on the road going to be a tough one, but I think this will still be a 50-50 game. Plus, Kentucky didn't finish really strong last year. Arkansas at home, you don't really know what this Arkansas team will look like just yet. But I got to put this one as a 50-50 game. Missouri on the road, that's going to be a 50-50 game. That's a game that Florida could probably win. Florida State, though, will be a tough one there at home as well. That's a rival game. You just never know what can happen. It's kind of similar to Tennessee as well. So how many games do I see them winning out of these games? I see them winning 2 out of those 5 games here that are in the white. I think they do have a really good shot to win some of these games. Maybe they win 3 of their home games and then lose those 2 road games to Kentucky and Missouri, but they still got other games here on the schedule that they're underdogs in, so they could lose more than 4 games this year. But this is kind of like a turnaround year for Florida, but we just don't know how good this team is going to be. Of course, Anthony Richardson is gone, so I mean that's going to be a big loss there for Florida, so we just don't know how good this team is going to be. So looking at Florida this year, let's now get to the projection for this team. Not my official prediction. This is simply a projection based on this schedule. So if you look at the games that Florida's favored in, and also the 50-50 games, and also the games that are underdogs in, the overall projected record for this Florida team comes out to be 6-6 for 2023. So the same record in the regular season last year. The reason why it's 6-6 as of right now is because of the schedule. The schedule is obviously tough for Florida. Plus, we don't know how good this team is going to be because they do lose a lot of production from last year. It's the second year for Billy Napier. I know it's going to take time for Florida to get back where they need it to be, but I mean, the question is, how good will they be? That's the question heading into 2023. But like I said, my prediction could change by the time we do our predictions heading into the month of May. But as of right now, I'm going to put Florida as a projected record of overall 6-6. Let me guys know what you think about this Florida team. What do you think their projected record should be? And also, what do you think about their team this year down in the comments below? And stay tuned here for more sports content on the Lucas Ross Sports Channel.